That's right. That just happened. It is 11:40 on a Friday. Hopefully everyone's doing well. Today we want to talk about the Tailgate Turbo. We got some the 5-liter Fords are not really other guys, but the turbo stuff is good. Um the Tailgate Turbo, other than just having like cool alliteration, is all it's good because that's awesome enough. But that came about because I needed to put together a turbo setup for a 5-liter Ford that we want to run on the engine dyno, and we wanted to run it using the factory exhaust manifolds. And you could also substitute shorty headers, and that would be fine. And guys can argue back and forth. Oh, you got to put the shorty headers on there because then that flows more, and then you can make more power with the turbo. Well, making more power with a turbo on a 5-liter is not really an issue. You could, even with the stock exhaust manifolds, which I agree are not ideal the way that they're pinched down, but I don't think that stops you from getting all of the turbo, particularly the one that we used was the GT45. So you're talking about if you wanted to do 700 or 750 horsepower, I think you could do that. I think the thing that would hold you back is if you were trying to do that with like a stock motor. So if you had a 5-liter from a wrecking yard, we ran a fuel injected version. We even ran it on a modified motor that had, decent aluminum heads and a cam intake manifold. You could do it on a stock motor. You could also do it on a carbureted motor, because you could do it on a motor that had, a blow-through carburetor and a dual plane intake manifold, or a single plane if you wanted some kind of cam, whatever you want to do. So it would work either way. You just do it on a bonnet, put a bonnet on it like we do with the CSU carburetor that we normally run. But all of that stuff would work fine. The point is that the kit, the kit itself, stock exhaust manifolds blowing into a Y pipe, and then you mount the turbo, and then you got a 3-inch pipe, in our case 3-inch exhaust coming out of the turbo, and then we ran it into our air to water intercooler. You could run it directly in if you were blowing through a carburetor. You could run it directly in and run it non-intercooled if you wanted. I wouldn't recommend that. I always recommend some kind of intercooler, but we did that on the 5-liter Ford. And even though we we did it to fit basically the constraints of the engine dyno, you have similar constraints in a vehicle. So can you work it around all of the things? Can you work it around fitment of the stock exhaust manifolds? Can you just flip those? Can you work it around, particularly in the Ford, where the filter is? You might need to do a remote filter for that application to get it out of the way. Will it work with the power steering and all that? So you have all of these things that you have to work around. And what you're going to end up doing is kind of cutting and pasting. You're going to be welding and bending and using bends and slicing and pie slicing. But the thing is, a lot of guys worry about, I don't have, perfect mandrel bends and it's pinched here. I'm like, just look at your stock exhaust manifold that you're starting out with. Once you looked at the pinched stock exhaust manifold, you're like, anything else from that is really just going to be a step up. The important thing for these kind of low buck, DIY kinds of turbo kits, the important thing is that you get it running. So build it and get all the exhaust to the turbo, figure out where your turbo can fit in your engine compartment, and then route all the exhaust over there. And when you're doing that, make sure, can I get the exhaust from the exhaust manifolds? Can we wire those together somehow? Can we build another one on the other side and just run from one side to the other and, go under wherever you can get under the oil pan, or if you have a dual sump deal, can you get under there? Is the cross member not there? Just how can you get that other exhaust to the other side and then have just go from a single one, into the turbo? However you can configure that, just make it work. And don't worry about, even if you have to, like we've run turbo setups where the exhaust is coming out of one side and the other one goes into it like at a 90 degree. No, it's not optimum. But what you're trying to get is not optimum anyway. You are not trying to make 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 horsepower from this thing. You're trying to make, several hundreds of horsepower. It's not going to be a problem. Even if it was teed in, and that's the only way that you could make it because of the surrounding area. Because remember, you not only have to get the exhaust to the turbo, but you have to get the exhaust from the turbo. It's got to go down somewhere in the same kind of area, somewhere in the engine bay. You've got to get the inlet going into turbo. Hopefully you remembered that, hey, Richard said I need to get cold air going to my turbo. Don't have it start out with 150 or 200 degree engine hood air, radiator fan wash stuff. Don't have it do that. You don't want to start at 200 and then intercool it and then heat it back up. Start at whatever ambient is. So I got to have some sort of inlet going to the inlet of that. And then I have to have the discharge going to some kind of intercooler, and then out of the intercooler into wherever I have it going into a bonnet for a blow through carburetor, or the EFI setup, which on a Ford typically is side mounted. So you've got to make that. So get all of that stuff laid up and see if you can make all that happen. Can I get all of that stuff to, can I make all that work? So it's a little bit of that. But my point is, when you're doing that, it's not critical that you have perfect 90-degree bends or less than 90-degree bends. It's not mandatory that you have, you can put the kinked muffler shop bends in. In fact, a lot of that, we did that. You can have that in there. They don't have to be mandrel bends. None of that stuff is mandatory. Yes, it's better. But if you're talking about taking a 250 horsepower Mustang engine and adding boost to it and making it a 350 or 400 horsepower turbocharged stock 5-liter application, you don't have to worry about any of that. You just have to get your turbo working so it's making boost into the motor. However you can do that, get all of your stuff together. If you can make it better, then make it better. If that also works, in addition to being able to get it around all of the, have it fit in the tight confines of some sort of engine bay, and you can get it around all of the things. Remember, you're not just missing it. You have to, on the heated exhaust portion of this, coming from the exhaust manifold, coming out of the head into the exhaust manifold to the turbo, those sections of piping are going to be really hot. So it's more than just you have to miss that. Like with the discharge side, where you're blowing air from the turbo into the manifold, it's not going to get that hot. It's not going to overheat things. The engine compartment is probably going to be hotter than that tube is, unless you're running fairly high boost. After the intercooler, it's all going to be a lot colder. But the stuff coming out of the exhaust manifolds could be 1,000 to 1,500 degrees. So it can't just miss something by a little bit. Stuff that's close to that is going to burn. Your oil filter is a good example on the 5-liter Ford. But other things, steering, any kind of hoses, anything else that's close to that, any sort of wiring, all of that stuff is going to be problematic. So make sure you miss by enough and give it some air gap room, so that you don't have to worry about overheating things. And even if you don't burn it immediately, cooking it over time is also going to be problematic. That's where you ruin lots of, vacuum lines and electrical things and all of that stuff. So all of that's a consideration. But the point is, if you can miss all that stuff, direct all the exhaust, get it to the turbo, and then let the turbo do its thing. Remember, you're going to have to also run and this is created issues sometimes when we've been doing stuff on the dyno. You forget about all the other things. You forget about all the hoses have to run to and from, but then also the oil drain. Oh yeah, the tubing can't go there because I can't get from the turbo down to the pan. If that's where I have to do it, I have to get down to the pan, and then it might have to run some weird way over the exhaust and not flow the drain oil back into the pan very well. So you got to make sure that also happens. The feed line is not a problem. It's pressurized. You can run it, every different which way and have it feed pressurized oil going to the turbo. The drain thing is a little bit more important because it's got to be above the oil level, and then it's got to drain back down in. If you have a pump and you could pump it up into the valve cover, then you have other options there. But most systems, especially a DIY thing like this, is not going to incorporate that sort of technology. It's just going to be a gravity feed. So you got to make sure that you're able to do that as well. But these systems, these DIY things where a guy welded it like I scab welded it together, it works well. And I've used these systems over and over and over again on the dyno. Once they're welded together, they work pretty well. Now, I would want probably maybe a real welder to do this in the car, but I wouldn't have a problem with the stuff that I have stuck together. It will work just fine. And I think now that I could put together a turbo kit that I would run in a vehicle, I can weld well enough for that sort of stuff to happen. I don't know that I would trust myself doing a roll cage for something like that. I think I would want a real welder to do that. But for exhaust stuff, it would not leak and it would work fine and it would stay together. I don't think that's going to be a problem. So get all that stuff to the turbo. Pick a turbo like we picked a GT45 because that's the one that we had laying around all the time. And it was sized pretty well for that. And we were able to make, I don't know, 550 horsepower, something like this, fairly easy. And you could make a lot more because there's a lot more boost to be had there. This was the motor that we ran it on with that Marshall like rebuilder special kind of thing. So stock rods, stock pistons and stuff. I don't even think we ever put ring gap in it. So we kind of limited it in terms of the power output, but I just want to demonstrate that you could do that and you could run it, but if we had something where we had done ring gap on it, you could turn the boost up and then you got to worry about the block, right? You got to figure, hey, what's going to happen tomorrow? Are we going to break this, the stock 5-liter blocks that split in half all the time? But whether or not they do that is a different story for a different day. How's everybody doing on these Fridays? Let's see. Start a poll. Would you feel comfortable enough to would you feel comfortable enough to weld together your own DIY turbo system? We'll start our poll. And we're off. And we're off and running. We're at 0%, 0%, 0%, 67, 80, 90, 80, 91, 80. It's like I'm announcing a horse race. And they're off and running. Getaway Jet, what's going on? Atlas, Arizona. Neil's in the house. Thanks for all you do. Happy to help. Lake Macquarie. Did I pronounce that right? New South Wales, Australia. Nice. Sad to hear about roadkill. I know that's a lot of guys are disappointed about that. Every day is a turbo day, especially Friday. It's Friday. You ain't got no job. You got stuff to do. It's not stuff though, right? Sadly, roadkill first death was leaving YouTube. Lots of us stopped right there, missed the days. Yeah, it was when it went behind the paywall, I think it lost a lot of people. And when it wasn't, they had problems with it going. It wasn't being aired in Australia or something. The Australian guys couldn't get it, I think. And there's lots of like diehard roadkill guys in Australia and probably everywhere around the world. I mean, that's a pretty popular deal. I just reached out to Freiberger about maybe doing something together. So we'll see if any of that transpires. Northern Canada, our boys up north. I don't know if it was a tornado, but some Oldsmobile manifolds ran exhaust or a tornado. Okay. I thought we were being weather related. Ran exhaust from one bank manifold to the other, and that manifold had an opening to accept exhaust from the other side on the single exhaust. That would be good for a turbo. The front wheel drive V6s are like that. A lot of the rear wheel drive stuff and I have a good exhaust test coming up for you guys where we ran. I didn't do it. Brian actually did it. And he sent me a message and said, hey, look, we're running a single exhaust on the dyno. I'm like, dude, you have to do the dual exhaust with your headers and stuff. And then the single exhaust, you have to run this test. I said, did you guys do this? He said, yeah, we did it. So we have a single exhaust going into a Y versus a dual exhaust. And there's some pretty cool results so somebody was telling me about this. One of the viewers was telling me about this. He goes, I think you're going to pick up good power here. And I'm like, okay, we want to test it. So it'll be kind of cool. But yeah, on the Tornado one, on the front wheel drive stuff, like the 3800, the L67, like the supercharged stuff and the NA stuff, that's what they do. They cross it over and run the exhaust from one side into the other side, and then it exits out the other side, and it's perfect for a turbo. We've done that quite a few times on those front wheel drive deals. Yep, just the pipe with the turbo, header wrap it. Yep, that's a good idea. Keep the heat away from stuff. Building a 4.3-liter V6 Vortec odd fire. Okay. Brodex heads Edelbrock intake, Garrett, GT35, 1050, custom headers for S2000. I'm suspecting a lot of header rep and heat protection. Goal is 600 horsepower. Yeah, that turbo should support that easily. And it's pretty easy to make. You can get up 300 or more without too much trouble with a 4.3 liter. Winter has come to Florida. It's only 65. That's like sweater weather, huh? I want to go back to Florida. I want to do more. I should probably try to hit up Garrett. I'm assuming he knows who I am. I'd like to see if he's got some areas that I could go look for snakes out there. That'd be fun. Wish I was still in Florida. Hate the winter anymore. Wish I was a snowbird. Florida summer is brutal. Scott, what's going on? Getaway. Not Scott Getaway. Getaways. Yeah. Just another person. It's Friday. 6 liter LQ4 Feral 80 big truck cam, 799 heads, Trailblazer SS, 1,000 horsepower goal, a stall converter. I don't know what cam you have. You got to tell me more about the cam. Is it the you don't have the big Haas or whatever Brian's cam is? Just tell me what camshaft it is, and that will kind of determine what the converter is. But 1,000 horsepower is just the right turbo on that. Error is best to call the manufacturer and provide the input. I feel comfortable and I've learned a lot. Denali XL, so big girl, about 6,500 from Arizona. Arizona's good. Lesson number 1, be careful about wire hanging onto the tubes and fuel lines. I speak from experience there. St. Martin, where is that at? 82 Monte Carlo SS, LS2 6 liter. That's a good one. I like those Monte Carlo SSs. I think those are really cool. I'm at work TIG welding. Sean, see how I'd have somebody like you weld that stuff up. Started off making my own turbo kits. Now I do it full time for everyone else. Primarily for the Honda Fit. Cool. I did some testing on those when I wrote I wrote a book on what we called B segment cars. I actually wanted to do Kai cars, Kai class cars, but the book guy said that there's not a big enough market for that. I said, you have no idea how cool those are. There's going to be lots of people that don't have those or will never even have those, but that want to read about performance stuff. But we did a bunch of testing with Oscar Jackson on the Honda Fit stuff. I like those cars too. Scott, I was leaning towards 2,800 to 3,200. Scottish, tell me what duration the cam is, and then I could tell you what kind of stall converter, but that's probably going to be right. Interested in the dual versus single exhaust? Yeah, me too. Aloha Friday. Happy to help. I just built a 95 4.3 liter Chevy making 300 horsepower NA. I'm going to turbo it. You recommend a T4 inlet, and what brands you recommend? Yeah, with 300 NA horsepower, a GT35 82 or the GT45 all of those will work on that and get you up where you need to be. 408 twin turbo LS, 4-inch stroke, 317 head. Do I need to check piston to valve clearance with this BTR cam? If you built a 408, my guess is the 408 has valve reliefs. The pistons have valve reliefs in it, right? So if you have valve reliefs, you're probably good. Do you have a stock? If you have a stock flat top piston, that cam might be troublesome. Although with that wide of LSA, it might fit. If you've got valve reliefs, it should fit. Let's see here. I know the 5-liter exhaust system are restricted from the factory. What size downpipe would you recommend? Well, the downpipe from the turbo is going to be dictated by what turbo and what power output you want. We ran on that GT45, we ran a 3-inch. If I was trying to max that turbo out, I would go bigger than that. Please have a great weekend, chat memories. All right. Here in Florida, everyone breaks out the winter coats when the temperature goes below 70. Yeah, it's all relative. Once you're used to cold weather, then it's not a big deal. The motorhome 440 turbo a few years ago. Did you ever push it past the 7? No, we only the boost that you saw there that we ran, because that wasn't even mine. It was Freiburger's. Snake, Central Florida, no problem. Yeah, I've already been there once. I went to look for the invasive species. We caught one Burmese python. We caught a lot of other kinds of snakes because there was no shortage of snakes, which is awesome for me because I loved it. I want to go catch a big python. I want to catch something that's more than 10 feet, preferably something that's 15 would be awesome. Scottish. Oh, the truck plus cam on and you have a 408. Is that did I get that right? I'm gonna scroll back here. Oh, a 6-liter. Okay, big truck cam. Okay. Yeah, I don't think you need to go any bigger than 2800 on that, but that would work fine. And having a converter on there will help, and it helps even with a stock cam. Ben, hey man, quick question. How much work do you think it would take to prepare a Ferrari V12 for boost? I don't know. I don't know which V12 you're talking about. Is it an early one? Is it well, yeah, because the Testarossas and stuff will be flat 12s. What year is it? Well, what car is it? Is it like a 365 GTB? Is it a Daytona Spider? Is it like, what is it? But it might be that the stock one will just work. I don't know how like sealed up they are because having never run one. But most motors will take like 12 pounds would be a lot because you're getting where you're going to near double the power output. But I would just look at all the normal things. I don't know, like I said, I don't know which one that is. I don't know what the availability of aftermarket parts are. It might be that you have to make or have made MLS head gaskets, which I would recommend, especially for that boost level. Head studs would be a good idea. And then obviously ring gap if you're taking the motor apart to put ring gap in it. Snake and Gatorland. Yeah, we saw there was no shortage of gators when we went looking, particularly at night. We went to the same areas during the day and saw no gators. And then when we went there at night, there was lots of them. I got a 5-inch downpipe. Nice. Can you offer an honest opinion on VS Racing turbos for someone on a budget? I've never had any problems with them. I have 2 VS Racing turbos and have never had any problems with either one of them. And Byron's a good guy, and he sells lots of stuff. I built a Gen 6 454 copy of your build for my 84 square. Makes just north of 1,000 on 18 pounds. Twin 7883s with a sniper. Cool. That should have no problem making 1,000 at 18 pounds. That's good. I saw one over 10 feet. That would be cool. I want to catch something because I think the biggest snake that I've ever caught would be something local here. And it was a gopher snake, and it was about 6 feet, which is pretty good size for a gopher snake. But I've never caught anything. I want to get something that's, big. 2001 453, putting a NSR Torque Norris cam. Do I need to gap piston rings before I add a turbo? Yes, you should always gap the rings for turbos. You can get the FF for 10,000. I don't know what that is. South Florida has an invasive iguana problem. Yeah, I've seen the iguana stuff too. Apparently some people are cooking them. Chicken of the trees. Yeah, I've seen that. I've watched the is it the Python Cowboy? Is that what the guy is? I've watched his stuff too. And he goes out with his dog, and he's got the CO2 stuff, and they shoot him, and then the dog goes and collects them because they've overrun places. So they hire him to come in and try to take care of them. Can you get a hold of me? I might have a way to keep the Motor Trend show going. You won't keep the Motor Trend show going. You could do a different show, but the Motor Trend one won't keep happening. What's the block limit on LQ4 with forged internals? We've done more than 1,500 with it. Chicken of the trees. That's right. Unrelated, I'd love to see an 8-liter V-twin from a Ram. Yep. Not for public, these snakes. Which ones are you talking about? Because I got no issue with any of those snakes. We catch lots of venomous stuff, and there's lots of that in Florida also. Lots of water moccasins. We found an eastern diamondback. It was just a little baby, but it would be cool to see more of those too because they're beautiful and they get big. Building a national aspirated 5.3. I think you might put a turbo on it. I'm not sure if I got the rings inside not to put a turbo. Am I going to have to worry about oil consumption? No, if you put ring gap in, if you put 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore and you drive it around, it will be fine. You're not going to have excessive blow by or any of that. Factory on box will take a lot of abuse. Yeah, 23 degrees of boost and 32 degrees of timing. It's like a dyslexic thing going on. Whoever was asking about getting a hold of Freiberger, yeah, if you could just let me know what you're trying to do, that would be fine. Thought that headstock internals or Gen 4 rods the most. The big bang stuff all has factory stuff in it. The last one where we made 1500 had Gen 4 rods because the motor was a Gen 4. It was an LY6 6-liter. But we've run Gen 3 stuff. All the previous ones were Gen 3s, and they all ran 1200, 1300, 1450 or whatever on the Gen 4 6-liter. Can anyone tell me the top to ring gaps for a turbo? Yeah, Mark, it's 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore is how much you want the gap to be for a turbo application. Every year in Pennsylvania, we have a rattlesnake roundup. I don't want to round them up and kill them because I think that that's a horrible idea. They do that in Texas too, which I think is just ridiculous. Do you think a turbo off a 6-liter Power Stroke would work on a 5.3? I don't think it's going to work very well. I think you'd be better off having 2 of them. Those turbos just are not designed to make very much horsepower. They're designed to make boost with low flow for torquey diesel applications, but they're not going to supply very much power, I don't think. How about a Gen 3 block board with forged internals? The block I'm not worried about. You're not going to hurt the block. Do you have the Gen 4 stock block, stock rods, stock crank, stock pistons went over 1500. If you're trying to go beyond that with forged internals, you're going to get to the limit of the block. I don't know if you have a forged crank in it or not. Know the motor trend line, roadkill, etc. Oh, they want to maybe take that over and buy that from him. That I don't know. I could put you in touch with them. Piston ring manufacturers will provide ring gap recommendations in performance applications. So I reached out to Freiberger about doing something on YouTube. I probably lift her head before hurting a block. It would definitely lift a stock head with less head gasket thickness. But yeah, once you get up, I think that 1500 horsepower, and guys have probably gone beyond that, but you get to the point where you're starting to worry about all the other stuff. You're worried about lifting the head. You're worried about the factory block, the caps moving around. You're worried about because we didn't use the steel crank. We just used the factory cast crank. If you put a steel crank in there, then that would be one less issue. But I think at that level, that's where you'd start worrying about. Most of the guys running those for any length of time, I think, are going to aftermarket blocks now. Moderate boost on a 4030 Wiseco piston is something like 6.5 thousandths. I have a little more than that. Yeah, and I've run a lot more. I mean, we run 35 thousandths on a 5.3, which is, if you do the math on it, it's a lot. Any potential camshaft giveaways? I don't have any giveaways coming up, but we do have, and I'll put the Man, I'm terrible at spelling. RichardHoldnerPerformance.com. Okay, so this is the RichardHoldnerPerformance.com. That's the website. And we do have, I think Jimmy just put up some, we have some Black Friday sales going on, some specials. So some of the things are 10% off. We've got injectors there. So we got 42/50s for NA guys. And then we got 72/80s for the boosted guys, some FIC injectors with the harness plug so that you can plug them right into the most of the truck stuff is kind of what I'm thinking about. We've got cams that are I think have a specials going on. We have springs, cam and springs, cam and lifters, cam and injectors. There's a bunch of things up there. So if you guys want to go take a look and go get in on the Black Friday stuff, that's going to be limited and it's going to be over. And then we're going to be going into December and Christmas and stuff. Richard, did you ever test a 6-liter Vortex Max? I don't know what that is, but all of the 6 liters respond exactly the same way. Vortex Max is an LQ9. Yeah, all of that's going to be the same. The LY6 would be similar to an LQ9. It has a valve relief piston in it, but it doesn't matter that it has a 6-liter. The LS2 stuff would all be the same short block. It's an aluminum block, but all the power is going to be the same. 76-pound chat people, great future. Do you recommend VS Racing for reliability? Yeah, the VS Racing stuff. Like I said, I've had nothing but good luck with it. Matt swears by it. He's used them a bunch. I said, no, but I do want to start by using scrap metal. It is good. Where I get lots of my stuff for the turbo exhaust too, if you're hacking and slashing and welding it together, I get it from the wrecking yard because Y pipes from a wrecking yard already have the flanges for the exhaust. Because like if you go into a Y pipe into a single exhaust, that's already a merge for a turbo setup. So I try to have as much of that done as possible so I don't have to weld merges together because it's just so much easier. Vortex Max is high compression pistons and a different camshaft. It's not the same as a regular 6-liter. It is the same as a regular 6-liter if it's something you're starting with and you're going to be changing the camshaft in it anyway. It's just a flat top 6-liter. So there's nothing special about it. I've tested all of the factory cams, so we know what all the factory cams do. And if you're going to be putting a piston in it, it's just a 6-liter with a flat top piston that you're putting the camshaft in. And we've run lots of that stuff. People always start with low or moderate boost, then crank it up. That's much better way to start. I would start with 3 or 4 pounds if we have a spring package for the wastegate that allows that. Because I like to sneak up on making sure everything is right. And then rather than roll in at 15 or 20 pounds, that to me, that's not logical. LQ4 only has slightly bigger cam, flat top pistons. It's nearly the same. Yeah. And I have testing done up on the LQ4, LQ9, the HO cam, all of those. Welding turbo kits is easy. I learned from YouTube University and got Harbor Freight TIG welder. Yeah, my 110 hot box thing has worked really well for lots of stuff. And then Westech has good welders there. Would 500 plus on a turbo be a good price to last me a decent amount of time, or would it be more pricey turbo to last me a longer time? Like I said, if you're trying to get one from Viren, it's a good turbo. And as long as you put oil in it before you start it and take care of it, it should last a long time. I have lots of eBay turbos that I've run that I've had for 10 years. I don't run them every day in the car, but we've run endless tests on those GT45s. So I haven't had a turbo go out on me. I've only ever had one turbo go bad on me when we dyno testing, and it went out as soon as we started it. But all of the rest of them have worked, and including the ones that we ran the original Big Bang stuff on back in 2010. Otherwise, it's an AliExpress adapter section. Yeah, and I don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on adapters and Y pipes and stuff, because then that starts making the turbo stuff, your turbo kit, expensive. On aluminum parts, I braze them because I can't weld. I made a custom. Yeah, I don't do intake or exhaust or aluminum welding. Only like mild steel stuff. My needs are very simple. There. But because a lot of the stuff came out of necessity, because when I first started testing at Westech, I couldn't do any of that. I couldn't do any of the tuning. I couldn't do any of the welding. And then rather than having to wait till somebody else could do that, I'm just going to do it, because let me just go do this. And the same thing with the tuning. I'm like, well, I would have Tom or Ernie or Ish or Eric, or those guys, and those guys got stuff to do. So as long as just like there's more fuel, there's less fuel, there's more timing, there's less timing, and if I have sharp guys like that I can ask if I'm having a problem with, hey, this isn't working out for whatever reason. Oh, you didn't do this or that, then that's fine. Once it's me just adding fuel and taking away fuel, that's pretty easy. My engine can run up to 15 pounds for boost. Should I start out at 8 psi because that's what I'm planning on running, or should I start at 3 or 4? Whatever the minimum is for your wastegate. A lot of times it depends on whatever spring you have in your wastegate. We start out when we're running boost on something, we run the NA thing, and then I have a fuel curve for all of that. Then all I have to do is double that at 15 pounds, put that in I'm running it with an aftermarket ECU. So if this thing wants whatever fuel this wants, I just take the top fuel numbers at like 100 kPa, put it up at the 200 kPa, and then double it, interpolate it down. So I have twice as much fuel going in at 15 pounds of boost as I had naturally aspirated. And then I add about 8 or 10% more on top of that. I take away all the timing and then roll into it and see where we are. And then I roll into it at 3,000 RPM, and it's making 7 pounds at 3,000 RPM with no timing in it, with like 10 or 12 degrees of timing in it. And then make sure that the air feels good. And then we try it at 3,500 and 4,000, and then go, okay, it seems like I can make a sweep here. And then we make a sweep and go, oh, look, it's went into 10 to 1 or whatever. And we start adjusting the air fuel once all that's right. And we always have good fuel in it. Even if I'm going to end up running 91, we have better than 91 when we're first starting the tuning. And so we get it running on 100 or a mixture of 91 and 100, or even better yet, E85. And we run all the testing on E85. When all that's safe, we take timing out of it, and then we can run on 91. And we do it, you do it so that it's smart. So you're not going to hurt something. Aluminum welding is not hard either. I've only tried it one time. I've only tried TIG welding one time. My buddy Jimmy is showing me how to do that, and I tried it. Let's just say that. Welding aluminum is not hard. Just make it a hobby and fool around with it. Yeah, it's just time, like everything else. Sorry for all the questions. What brands have good turbo kits? I don't know about turbo kits, because I very rarely do I ever run turbo kits, because the kits more often than not don't fit on the dyno the way that we have things around the dyno. So I just make the turbo. I'm only concerned about the turbo size, and then having the intercooler and stuff. What do you, Steve, I'm sure your question is, what do you do about spark with boost? It depends on, like, when we run an aftermarket ECU, I put the timing curve in that I want under boost. And on a carbureted combination, we would retard the timing manually, or we have a digital 7 ignition amplifier that hooks up to the MSD distributor that we'd run on a carbureted deal. And then we can take timing out that way also. I'm late to the chat. What type of tailgate set were you talking about? The tailgate turbo was me building a turbo setup, a turbo kit, actually just the Y pipe section of it, with the engine in the back of the truck on the tailgate. If you run a turbo on a 5.9 Magnum, on a 5.7 Hemi, we have, but not on a Magnum. What's your stream schedule? I'm normally here at 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, And then sometimes one other time during the day, it's random. If your oil feed to the turbo gets metal and trash in it, it's going to eat up a turbo, regardless if it's $1,000 or $100 turbo or $1,000 turbo or a $5,000 turbo. You have to have clean oil going to it. That's important. Toad hanger, jumper cables. Secret is a LiPo battery. Bob's your brother. I thought Bob's your uncle is what it was the saying. I think the intelligent clarity of question would be far better if the comment chat allows for more characters. Is that possible? I don't know if it does. I think that YouTube has a character limit. And then Bob's your uncle. But you can put half of it in and then the other half of it in, one right after the other. That's possible. But then Bob definitely is your uncle, right? Near. Get all the exhaust to the turbo, and then good things happen. Just sending a text. Boom. Giving my buddy Brian Chulis a hard time. No, I'm good. I'm okay. I have an uncle named Bob. Maybe that explains my good luck with the car projects. There you go. See, Bob's your uncle. You're all set. Near. What are you going to do? Mopar Big Block. I haven't done one of those since that 440 that I borrowed. And that's the only Mopar Big Block that I've ever done. It's just one that belonged to Freiberger. A lot of rain coming your way. That's what I heard. It's alive. Engine in the back of the truck would be hook crazy. Reminds me of LS swap Porsches. Yeah, it was just sitting there when we were doing it. But and actually, the first thing I did was I took it over to my muffler shop guys who are now. This used to be like a little kind of mom and pop and just pop muffler shop that I used to go to. And this guy was fantastic. I could just walk in and he would be like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that for you right away. We'll do that." And then he got his sons working there, and his sons are really good, like social media savvy guys, because they're young guys. And then now the place is just blown up. Now it's like that they don't even know who I am. I'm like, but you guys are my guys, man. I recently learned how compound turbos work, and they're functioning like a turbo shaft engine. Your piston engine is the combustor. Okay. When running a draw through, the thing that I don't like about compound turbos is I don't like the high pressure relative to the power gain. I just don't like seeing, like when we did the compound stuff with the blower and the turbo and the blower and the blower, the amount of power that we made at a way higher boost than just having one turbo there. I just don't like that. I know what it's doing and I understand it. I just don't like seeing the high boost pressure. When running draw through systems, would the fuel distribution be worse or better after going through the impeller? I don't know. I suspect that even if we're going to chop up and super atomize the fuel, I don't know how it doesn't get evenly to the intake to all the runners in the intake manifold when the intake manifold itself has trouble getting equal fuel distribution, even when we're port injecting the thing. So I think we're still going to have a problem with a draw through setup with intake manifolds that are designed to be airflow only anyways. Aren't cooler plugs and less plug gap recommended for boost? Yes. Colder plugs are recommended, and you need less plug gap to stop from misfire. I usually put plug gaps at like 19 or 20 thousandths. Can get an on 3 76 75 turbo cheaper. Are they any good? I've never tried any of their stuff, so I don't know about their kits. I would imagine that their turbos are similar to the other stuff that everybody gets from probably the same manufacturer. Welding, you say? Me and my Harbor Freight Flux welder are up to more than some would think. That's good. There are lots of good welders out there. You soak your lifters before installing? I do. When I put lifters in, if I'm putting lifters in, normally it's when I'm building a whole motor, because most of the times when we do these cam changes, like in an LS junkyard motor, I reuse the lifters. We have lifters on our website, but and they're LS7 lifters, so they're good ones. But I still am not just going to tell you, yeah, you all need to put new lifters in, because I don't recommend that. I mean, if we're getting a junkyard motor and I'm doing a cam swap in it, I use the lifters that are in there. If they're working, that's good. There are some things now that I think about that I would have just taken chances on back in the day, like the lifter trays that have the mileage like my truck has, like 350,000 miles. The lifter trays will wear out. Though if it's a telltale sign that if you're doing a cam swap and you rotate the cam and the lifters are no longer holding, the lifter trays are no longer holding the lifters up, they've worn out. And it's not going to be long before, if they can move freely up and down and it doesn't hold it in place anymore when you rotate the camshaft, they'll be able to spin before too long. And that's not good. So lifter trays, the problem with the lifter trays is that, just like with lifters, is that you have to take the heads off. Now, if you're going to do ring gap and stuff, you should be doing all that anyways. If you're going to do ring gap, it's time to at least change the lifter tray. And then you could think about lifters. But we have those available now. And the other thing that I didn't talk about as much as, excuse me, as much as I think I should have, is that when you're doing a cam upgrade on a 4.8 or 5.3 or 6 or whatever, unless you have a set of the bigger factory injectors, you're going to need injectors. I mean, you can't take a set of 25-pound injectors and put a cam in it, like one of my cams or a Truck Norris from Brian Tooley or Chupacabra, or even something bigger than that, like some of the 220 or 230 cams. If you're going to do a cam upgrade where you're getting 50, 60, 70 horsepower gain, you're going to need more fuel flow. You have to have the fuel flow that goes with that. And so that's why I wanted to offer injectors, because it's something that I hadn't been talking about, other than usually just offhandedly saying, yeah, we've run 80s on everything because it made life easy. We have 80s that go into the factory truck rails and stuff. And we had just, before that, I had just been putting those Deca 80s in everything. And I didn't mind spacing up the rails and stuff, because for what we're doing on the engine dyno, it's really easy and you can get away with a lot of different things. But it's much better to have the rail bolt down solidly and have it register the flat where you're bolting it down, have it register against another flat, so that the rail can't, like, you know, especially when you put pressure on it, you'll see when you put pressure on it, particularly if the injector is sized so that there's a little bit of movement either in the rail or down in the manifold, you'll see it push the injector down. It'll try to push the injector out of the rail because it has pressure there. And so it will also allow the rail to cock one side or the other, one way or the other. And trust me, I speak from experience, having run super Richie style rails on these setups that are not designed, that rail and that injector are not designed to go together on that intake manifold. And we've zip tied it down, and you could see it when we put pressure to it, it lets the rail cock sideways or whatever. So it's just better to have the right injector and rail setup. And it has to be big enough for what you're doing, and also so that it's sealed down and you don't get fuel leaks. Because we've had some of those. And luckily, when we're not getting fuel pressure when we're trying to start the motor, we turn the fuel pump on and fingers crossed, make sure that everything's okay, that we don't have any fuel leaks. And then we see the fuel leak. Sometimes it will happen later on because it won't leak initially and we'll be making a run or whatever. And then it'll start spraying, which is not good. So the upshot of this is we have injectors and for these rails, and carburetors also work. All that's good. I PM'd you under Rodney Mitchell. Okay, I'll take a look. I have lifters soaking now. And and the point was on the lifters, if I'm putting these things together and we're putting new lifters in, I put the lifters in a thing of oil and I just let them soak and let the bubbles come out. Recently picked up a Ram 1500 with an eco junk cylinder deactivation. Any options if it's worth disabling in the ECU? I don't know about the Dodge Ram stuff. The MDS I've done stuff with on the earlier ones, and we've gotten rid of those. I have run those injectors on an aftermarket ECU with cam swaps. I've done that. I don't know that that's ideal, and we've even run it out at like 6,500 RPM or something. But since then, I have changed away from those lifters and just put standard lifters in it. I'm scrolling. Small electric turbo for low RPM for quick response. Shuts off 1500. Big turbo for maximum horsepower. Compound setup. Yeah, like I said, you're still compounding and then having a high boost pressure. But you could do either a compound setup. You could do a sequential setup also. I'm not sure what compression ratio the boost was, but apparently it was meant for large differences in pressure to reduce temperature and entropy, according to the articles. Okay, you are welcome to do all of the compounding stuff that you want. Whose lifters did you use on your L29? The L29 stuff were the factory lifters. And if we ever put new lifters in anything, they probably came from comp at the time. Does the 4.3 V6 have issues turning over 6,000 RPM? I hear people breaking cranks and trying to rev those. I haven't seen that. We've run them more than that. On the topic of fuel injectors or Siemens Deck 80s, any good? Yes, the 80s, those we've been running a lot. So I have no problems with those. And I probably will be offering something like that for things that fit that length injector. A lot of YouTubers suggest to not open up short block of an LS. They say Chevy built clearance is right and that opening up complicates reliabilities. Those are people that don't understand engines because none of that is accurate. A factory LS is going to have really tight ring gap. It'll be in the teens from the factory. And they did that not thinking that later on somebody was going to have turbos on these. They did that so that they have tight ring gaps to try to minimize emissions and try to maximize fuel mileage. And that worked very well. And then you'll get also groups of guys that tell you, oh yeah, it has lots of miles on it. It has worn ring gap into it, which is also 100% false. Because there's very, very little bore wear in these things. And we can have things that have multiple hundreds of thousands of miles on them, and you can still see crosshatch on them. And so there's no, when you take apart an LS, I want somebody to show me an LS that has a bore that has ridges at the top like a traditional small block Chevy has, because the bore has worn, but the top where there's no ring action, basically there's no ring contact, that doesn't wear. So that stays the same. And the stuff below it all wears where the ring is riding on the bore. You don't see that on LS motors. And so you'd have to have the ring wear, and the ring wears very little. I've taken apart stuff that has 200,000 miles on it, 250,000 miles on it, and the ring gap is still in the teens. And so there's no truth to that either. My Denali's name is Katrina. Okay. Katrinka. Even better. Hoping she makes a scene in the truck world over the next few years. Cool. Also, do oil pumps need to be shimmed or aligned with fueler gauges? Not on LS motors. I don't mind welding up a few pipes. My welding is not the best. I've slowly been devoting time to learning how to do it. To use my TIG welder more. Cool. I recently drove a 5.3. Scrolling. And 6.2 new Chevy trucks. They don't offer 25 6.2 with the options we want. I understand the truck is heavy, but a 5.3 is not strong enough. It gets 1 mile per gallon less on the highway. Are the new one a 25? Is that an L84 now? Is that what that engine designation is for the VVT one? I mean the LT version? Because I know the L83 stuff and the L86 stuff has now been replaced by something else. I could always buy a much more expensive welder and get much better results out of it. I look at welders and stuff like that just the same way that I look at guys buying more expensive things for their cars. Is are you at the limit of where you're at? So like when I was a driving instructor, guys were wanting to upgrade their cars. I'm like, dude, you are 7 or 8 seconds slower than a good driver in this car. So all of that's free. You just learn how to do better driving, and that costs you nothing. You could put, sticky tires on it or more suspension stuff or more power or whatever, and that could help. But there's lots of free stuff first. And so I would look at this, for me, I would look at that the same way. How big do flex fuel injectors get? I think that those are 50s. Will a tune and exhaust change my mind on the 5.3? I don't know. I don't know how much extra power they're getting from that stuff. Any benefit in junkyard scavenging? Yeah, if you can find flex fuel injectors, those are a good choice. Because really, for a cam upgrade like on a 5.3, you could get away with like 30-pound injectors, and I think that those are available from the factory. NASCAR went to odd fire cranks for the 4.3 because they spin them to 9,500. It's a common rod pin crank. Stock has a cast split pin rod, which weakens a crank. It does, but I don't think it weakens it at 6,500. I don't think that that's an issue. 7875 is a good turbo. Turbo size really depends on how much power you want. But that 7875 is one that Viren does. And then I would look at if Viren's selling the VS stuff, you could look at the OG like cast wheel stuff. But the Gen 2, Gen 3, next gen stuff is even better wheel designs. 35 pounds an hour, I believe, for stock LS3 stuff. Ring gap is at 26,000, so with 206,000 miles on it. I've never seen anything be that loose with from just being a high mileage one. When building LS engines, what parts would you benefit from having loose tolerances, and why would it be beneficial? Normally, what you do for a boosted engine, you would have more ring gap because you have ring growth under temperature, and then they also change the you might change the piston to wall clearance with temperature, but mostly that's with piston material. So you go from a cast piston to a forged piston. You have to have more piston to wall clearance because of the piston growth. There's more growth in the forging than there is different kinds of forgings than there are in the cast pistons. And then also bearing clearance. You'll normally have more bearing clearance, and then you want to have probably what most people do is put more oil pump in when they have more clearance. I was wrong in thinking it would be larger for the E85. Why does everyone run the Holly Terminator X when so many other standalones can run an LS? The Haltech Rebel is a good example. There's lots of good ones. When do you think you're going to do the 2.2 Dodge? I don't know. I would like to do that. And I have a 2.5 also. Would it be worth it to buy an 05 300C with a 5.3 Hemi, build it and turbo it? Well, if you bought a Hemi, it would be a 5.7 and not a 5.3. And I have turbo stuff up on the 5.7. I like the turbo diesel stuff. Starting to think about them. Those are good. It's one thing to watch and listen to experts, and another to try to do it yourself. I try lots of stuff on my own. That's good. That's how you get experience. I don't know what you mean by thoughts, Alex. What's better, a 5.7 Heavy or a 5.7 LS? I don't know what you mean by better. There. We got one more minute. I'm going to get rid of my poll here at 83%. Would you feel comfortable enough to weld together your own DIY turbo system? 83% saying yes. There we go. I like my DIY people. Yeah, Mark, a lot less growth on cast stuff and hyperprotective stuff. Usually those piston to wall is a lot tighter. They make less noise when you first start them up. And I think I would argue that you might even get better fuel mileage that way. And I was talking to Brian about this. We tend to think that the motor makes more power with at the same compression ratio with a cast piston than with a forged piston. So maybe I have to have that up one day. People can argue about that. That's right, Kimi. That's right. Bob is your uncle or is he your brother? Could he be both? One more minute. It's Friday. You guys all need to go out and do Friday stuff. Banjos intensify. My forged turbo Civic sounds like a diesel until I warm up. Yeah, I bet they do. They are noisy. You got to put like that 4,000 to 6,000 piston to wall thickness on it. And then I wonder, and I don't know. I'd have to ask somebody about this because I don't know enough about this. I'd like to see if the piston to wall needs to be different on a factory aluminum block versus a factory iron block. I know that the factory stuff are pretty good about doing that, but I wonder if the OEM, if it's different on the like an L33 block versus an LM7 block. And if they use the same piston, which I know that they use a flat top in one of those, but let's say that they used a flat top in both of them. I wonder if they have different pistons in those and or if the piston to wall clearance is different for those. At what point would you recommend dropping your compression ratio with a turbo LS? I wouldn't. We just run the factory, whatever the factory is. Scottish, happy to help. The aluminum blocks are steel sleeve, though. They are, and that's what I'm wondering. The cylinder is steel, the sleeve is steel, but is that going to have exactly the same growth as the steel sleeve in the iron block? That's what I don't know. We might be talking about like nothing statistically significant, no change at all. But I just was wondering if there's a difference. Near. Yeah, Quinn, I don't think I'd run if there was a factory motor, for instance, that had a big ugly dome piston on it, like the big dome that's in a DZ302 motor for a small block Chevy. I mean, you could run boost on that, but I don't think I would. I think I'd put a different piston in that just to bring down the compression for one thing. And also because I think that big dumb dome is in the way and doesn't have good flame travel. And I think it would be much more prone to detonation with that dome in there than it would be than if we were to get it with a smaller chamber and a flat top piston. If you want to see the limits of a stock block, see a PFI video from MIR. Is that are you talking about the Honda one? That the K series deal, I think. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. Go check out the Black Friday stuff up on the website, richardholderperformance.com, and I will see you guys all later. Do Friday things, do shopping, go to richardholderperformance.com. Come on, man.